The three most crazy Roman emperors, when power lost its mind. Did you know that at the height of Rome's power, some emperors ruled not with reason but with chaos? The empire that once built aqueducts and roads to connect continents also produced rulers whose behavior shocked their own senators, soldiers, and citizens. These emperors were not just eccentric. They were living storms of ego, desire, and madness. Let us step into the marble halls of ancient Rome, where gold glittered but sanity was often missing. Our first stop is with Caligula, the young emperor who inherited Rome's throne in the year 37 AD. His real name was Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. But the world remembers him by a nickname given in childhood, meaning Little Boots. As a boy, he followed his father, the famous General Germanicus, on military campaigns. Soldiers adored him for his small uniform and tiny sandals that matched their own. It was cute then. No one knew the little boy with the charming smile would grow into one of history's most unpredictable rulers. When Caligula became emperor, Rome celebrated wildly. After the dark reign of Tiberius, people saw him as a savior. He gave bonuses to soldiers, ended unfair trials, and brought home exiled families. For a few months, hope returned to the empire. But soon that bright image cracked. Some say illness struck him down, and when he recovered, something in his mind had changed. Others whisper that absolute power simply unmasked what was already inside him. Caligula began to believe he was a living god. He ordered temples to place his statue beside Jupiter, the king of all gods. He walked through the palace dressed as Apollo one day, and Venus the next. He spoke to the moon as if it were an old friend. The Senate watched in silence, afraid to question a man who could order death with a single nod. Let's float over to one of his strangest moments. Caligula loved his horse Incitatus so much he built him a marble stable. The horse wore jewels around his neck and ate oats mixed with gold flakes. Caligula even planned to make him a consul, the highest political office in Rome. To him it was a joke. To the senators it was an insult. The empire that once honored heroes now bowed to a horse. His cruelty grew darker. He enjoyed inviting guests to lavish banquets only to watch them squirm in fear, not knowing if they would leave alive. Once he ordered an entire section of the audience at the Colosseum to be thrown into the arena because he ran out of criminals for the lions. Power had become his stage in Rome, his captive audience. Yet perhaps what frightened people most was his laughter. He laughed when people cried. He laughed when soldiers begged for mercy. Some historians say Caligula's madness came from deep paranoia. He believed conspiracies surrounded him at every turn. But instead of finding peace, he became the storm himself. His guards and senators could no longer stand it. One morning in 41 AD, they struck him down in the palace corridor. It was quick and brutal. Rome took a breath of relief, but the echoes of his madness would stay for centuries. Now we move forward to another emperor, whose name still carries a shadow of fear, Nero. He was only 17 when he became emperor, in 54 AD. At first guided by his mother Agrippina and wise advisors, he promised peace and justice. But power once again turned sweetness into poison. Nero began to see himself not as a ruler, but as an artist. He wanted Rome to love him not for his leadership, but for his music, poetry, and plays. He sang on stage wearing silk robes while senators clapped in fear, pretending to be moved. He performed for hours while guards made sure no one dared to leave before he finished. For Nero, art was everything. But behind that curtain lay a growing darkness. His relationship with his mother soured. She had placed him on the throne and now tried to control him. In a chilling twist, Nero ordered her death. Even Roman historians struggled to describe that moment. A son killing the woman who gave him the crown. Let's glide to a night that burned itself into history. In the year 64 AD, fires swept through Rome. The flames devoured homes, temples, and marketplaces for days. Ancient writers claimed Nero watched the fire from his palace towers, singing about the fall of Troy as the city burned below. Whether that story is true or not, it became legend. The people's anger was fierce. To protect himself, Nero blamed a small group of followers of a new faith called Christians. Many were arrested and executed in cruel public shows. The fire ended, but the fear it created remained. Nero's spending drained the treasury. He built a golden palace in the heart of the ruined city, with marble halls and a lake in the center. Statues of himself stood taller than the gods. He called it his golden house. The Senate began to whisper again. Generals in far provinces saw weakness. Rebellion rose in Gaul, Spain, and even among his own guards. When news reached him that the Senate had declared him a public enemy, Nero fled the city that once cheered his name. Alone and hunted, he ended his life with a dagger. His final words were said to be, "What an artist dies in me." Let's pause here for a moment. Rome had seen brilliance and madness woven together like threads in a single robe. Each emperor began with dreams of glory. Each fell into the trap of their own reflection. Yet the empire continued. It was as if Rome itself absorbed their chaos and still moved forward. The sun rose over the Guadalete River. The mist of dawn lifted like a curtain before a grand stage. On that stage stood two armies facing one another. On one side, King Roderic's grand host of Visigoths, with banners of gold and crimson. On the other, Tariq ibn Ziyad's smaller band of warriors dressed in plain armor, their eyes steady, their hearts unshaken. What followed that morning would not just decide a battle. It would decide the future of a continent. The sound of horns signaled the start. Roderic's army advanced with the weight of a nation behind it. Horses thundered across the plain. The Visigothic nobles shouted orders, shields formed walls. Arrows filled the sky. Yet through that storm, the Muslim warriors held their ground. Tariq's men fought not for land or treasure, but for faith. Their movements were quick, light, and disciplined. Their chants rose above the clash of metal. Allahu Akbar, they cried as they struck. Tariq led from the front. He moved like a wave through his soldiers, shouting words of courage. He carried no throne, no crown, only his belief in victory. He fought beside his men, his sword flashing in the sunlight. His courage turned fear into strength. When the enemy pressed hard, his voice rose louder. When his men weakened, his faith revived them. King Roderick, far behind his lines, watched from his royal chariot. His generals assured him the day was his. The Muslims were few, they said. Their end was near. Yet as the sun climbed higher, the field told a different story. One by one, parts of Roderic's army began to falter. Dust and confusion spread. Some of his commanders, loyal to rival claimants of the throne, began to pull their troops back. Betrayal spread like shadow through the ranks. Let's float over the battle plain. Imagine the heat rising, the sound of horses crying, and the shouts of men echoing over the land. Tariq's soldiers pressed forward in small groups, striking fast and vanishing among the hills. The Visigoths, heavy with armor, struggled to chase them. The Muslims moved like wind. Every hillside, every grove became their ally. As the day wore on, the balance shifted. Tariq gathered his men for one final charge. He raised his sword toward the sky. His words carried across the noise of the battlefield. He told them that the ships were gone and behind them lay only the sea. Ahead of them was the promise of God. There would be no turning back. Then he led the attack. The Muslim line surged forward like a living tide. The Visigothic army broke. Panic spread through their ranks. The ground shook beneath the sound of fleeing horses. Tariq's men cut through their lines with relentless force. By evening, the once great army of King Roderick had collapsed. Roderick himself vanished in the chaos. Some say his chariot was found near the river. Others say he drowned trying to escape. His crown was lost in the mud. His body was never found. The Battle of Guadalete was over. The Visigothic kingdom, which had ruled Spain for 3 centuries, was shattered in a single week. Tariq ibn Ziyad stood upon the field surrounded by the remnants of both victory and ruin. His men were exhausted yet full of faith. They had done the impossible. With no ships and no retreat, they had conquered an empire. But Tariq's vision did not end at Guadalete. He knew this was only the beginning. Spain lay open before him. Great cities awaited: Seville, Cordoba, and finally Toledo, the royal capital. Each would fall not through terror but through strategy, patience, and faith. Tariq divided his forces into smaller groups. Each moved through the valleys of Andalusia. Some cities surrendered peacefully. Others resisted briefly and then opened their gates. The Muslim commanders respected local people. Churches were not destroyed. Farmers were allowed to keep their lands. The new rulers established order and peace where there had been years of civil war. Let's drift now to the gates of Toledo. The ancient capital of the Visigothic kings stood silent as Tariq approached. The city's nobles, seeing the fate of Roderick, offered terms. Tariq accepted. He entered Toledo with humility. He did not ride as a conqueror, but as a governor. He ordered protection for the people and ensured fair treatment for all. Under his command, the early foundations of Al-Andalus were laid. Yet news of Tariq's success spread quickly. Across the sea in North Africa, Musa ibn Nusayr heard of the victories. Musa had sent Tariq only as a small expeditionary force. Now, within a few months, the Berber general had overthrown an entire kingdom. Some say Musa was proud. Others say he felt envy. The caliph in Damascus demanded an explanation. So Musa prepared his own army and crossed into Spain to join Tariq. When Musa arrived, he brought tens of thousands of soldiers. Together, the two generals pushed deeper into Spain. They captured more cities. They marched through valleys, across rivers, and over mountains. From the south to the heart of Iberia, the crescent banners rose. Within 3 years, nearly the entire peninsula was under Muslim control. Yet tension grew between the two men. Tariq had acted swiftly, sometimes without waiting for orders. Musa was the official governor and wanted to ensure his authority. Their relationship, once built on trust, now stood on delicate ground. But both knew that their mission was far greater than personal pride. In 714, a message came from Damascus. The Caliph al-Walid ordered Musa and Tariq to return at once. They were to explain their campaign and present their spoils. The two generals obeyed. They left Spain under trusted governors and began their long journey east. As they traveled, stories of their conquests spread through the Islamic world. In every city they passed, people gathered to see the men who had carried Islam across the sea. Poets wrote of the fire that had consumed their ships. Scholars spoke of their courage. Even their enemies admitted respect for their boldness. But when they reached Damascus, the reception was not what they expected. The caliph was ill. The court was filled with intrigue. Musa faced jealousy and accusations from rivals. Tariq, humble as always, faded into the background. Some records say he lived quietly after that. Others say he returned to North Africa. His final years are a mystery. Still, his name endured. The mountain he first landed upon kept his memory alive. Jebel Tariq, Gibraltar, a place where faith crossed the sea and changed the world. Let's pause at that shore once more. Imagine the firelight dancing on the waves. The ships burning behind them. The smell of salt and smoke in the air. The men standing side by side, knowing that their lives were already given to something greater than themselves. That moment was not about destruction, it was about commitment. It was about stepping beyond fear. The story of Tariq ibn Ziyad did not end on the battlefield or in the halls of Toledo. It began a new chapter that would echo for centuries. After his bold conquest, the world around him changed forever. The flames that had devoured his ships lit a new dawn for Spain, a dawn called Al-Andalus. Let's float over the hills of Andalusia now. The same lands where Tariq's army once marched are quiet. Olive trees cover the slopes. The air carries the scent of citrus and soil. The call to prayer drifts across valleys where Roman bells once rang. In this new world, the fusion of cultures began. Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived under the same sky. Their languages, their sciences, and their arts began to blend. From the ashes of conquest rose a civilization unlike any other. The Muslims brought learning and tolerance. They preserved the wisdom of Greece and Rome. They introduced new crops and irrigation systems. They built roads and libraries. And in cities like Cordoba, Granada, and Seville, they created centers of knowledge that would later inspire Europe's own awakening. Cordoba became the jewel of Al-Andalus. Its streets were lined with lamps at night. Its libraries held hundreds of thousands of books. Its physicians studied the human body with methods centuries ahead of their time. Its poets wrote of love, nature, and faith in words that still survive. Travelers from Christian Europe came to learn from Muslim teachers. The flow of knowledge crossed faith and language. This was the quiet legacy of Tariq's journey. And yet, few remembered the man himself. Tariq ibn Ziyad faded into history's shadows. There are no palaces built in his name. No marble statues guard his grave. But the mountain that bears his name still rises over the sea. Gibraltar stands like a stone guardian, watching over the waters he once crossed. Every ship that sails by passes the memory of his courage. Let's drift back to that moment once more. The night he burned his fleet. Imagine his men standing in silence. The wooden ships turning to embers. The waves glowing red under the moonlight. That fire was not destruction. It was transformation. Tariq was not cutting off escape. He was cutting off doubt. He was teaching his men that faith cannot live with hesitation. When the heart believes, it does not need a way back. This lesson spread far beyond the shores of Spain. Across generations, leaders and thinkers spoke of him. In stories told in the marketplaces of Damascus, in the mosques of Cairo, in the classrooms of Cordoba, he became a symbol of certainty, courage, and conviction. His decision to burn the fleet was not a tale of war alone. It was a lesson about commitment to one's path, no matter the odds. Let's move now to the later centuries. The age of Al-Andalus flourished for hundreds of years. Under Muslim rule, Spain became a land of light and learning. Mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and philosophy thrived. The great mosque of Cordoba rose with its endless arches, glowing like sunlight frozen in stone. The Alhambra in Granada shimmered with calligraphy and fountains that whispered poetry. Every wall, every courtyard, every carved verse reflected a balance between beauty and faith. Even Europe's Renaissance was born from the knowledge preserved and expanded in Al-Andalus. When darkness fell over the old empires, it was through the works of Muslim Spain that light returned. The scientific texts, translated from Arabic to Latin, became the foundation of modern learning. Words like algebra, chemistry, and zenith still carry the breath of that era, and all of it traced back to a single step on a rocky shore. To one man's resolve. To Tariq ibn Ziyad standing before his soldiers, telling them that the sea behind them meant nothing compared to the destiny ahead. But history is never still. Centuries later, Al-Andalus began to fade. Internal divisions weakened it. Christian kingdoms in the north began to push south. The Reconquista slowly rolled forward. City after city fell. By 1492, Granada, the last Muslim stronghold, surrendered. The age that began with Tariq's landing came to a close. Yet even in its end, the spirit of Al-Andalus did not die. It lived on through art, music, science, and memory. The architecture of Spain still bears the mark of those centuries. The language still holds Arabic echoes. The songs, the instruments, the gardens, all whisper fragments of a forgotten age. Let's pause here for a moment and reflect. Tariq ibn Ziyad never returned to Spain after being summoned to Damascus. His final years remain uncertain. But his legacy does not depend on his end. It rests on what he began. A simple truth that faith and purpose can reshape the world. Standing before the burning ships, he did not know how far his name would travel. He did not know that centuries later, his mountain would still bear his name. He did not know that his step into Spain would open 1,000 years of cultural exchange between Islam and Europe. He only knew that retreat was not an option. History remembers kings and emperors, but often forgets those who carried belief instead of crowns. Tariq was one of those few. A man who crossed the sea with a handful of soldiers and left behind a world transformed. Let's drift once more to Gibraltar. The wind moves across the rock. The waves crash below. The same sea that once separated two worlds now connects them. Ships pass every hour, their wakes shining under the sunlight. Somewhere beneath those waves lies the memory of burned wood and rising smoke. And in that smoke, we can still find the spirit of Tariq ibn Ziyad, the general who set fire to his own fleet, so that faith could sail forever forward. The mountain still stands, the waves still sing his name, and the world still turns under the echo of his courage.